Familial Curriculum Making, Reshaping the Curriculum, Making of Teacher Education, Jean Clandenden, Sean Murphy, and Janice Huber. So my prof, Janice. I really enjoyed this one too, of the same style that I've really grown to appreciate, which weaves together theory, thought, and actual narrative. This one followed a mother of a girl in kindergarten, who wrote journal entries throughout their narrative study, and then some of the actual journal entries are put right into this piece. So really fun to read, and a lot of really interesting insights. It begins with the assertion that we are living in a time of greater standardization, greater achievement, focus on achievement tests, and greater diversity, and kind of puts forward the idea that that doesn't really work. It's like if your society is becoming more and more diverse, how are you going to also push standardization and achievement tests? One point I have to make is that I don't actually feel like we're in a time of growing standardization or achievement tests. I feel like we've started to swing the other way, and I would argue that since my time in university, around 2010 at least, the greater consciousness again of the issues around standardized testing I've felt in my life. I think that's because of the failures of No Child Left Behind, and in my world, I always knew about the negatives of standardized testing, and when I came out of university, my feeling is that everyone was anti standardized tests and achievement tests. Since teaching, I've become for some version of standardized testing, and that really stems from my experience as a first and second year teacher teaching grade 4, as well as my student teaching experiences in Montreal, where in grade 4 there are no standardized tests, and also in Montreal they had just changed the curriculum. And all of those experiences were really hectic in that I didn't have a well-defined program of studies. I had outcomes, but I didn't have clear resources. I didn't have clear things to do. And it was a shock because I had thought of teaching as the priorities being building relationships and like enacting lessons well. And that was like in my mind, it was like a pie with two pieces. You know, build relationships, do lessons well, and then on top of that, coach and do all these extra things. But that was like where I thought I would spend my time. And what I found was in my first 4 years of teaching, a majority of my time was actually spent building lessons, choosing what to teach, and building the curriculum, which to me I actually found frustrating. I wanted something solid to work within, and then I could create it from there. But when I had kind of wishy-washy, loose outcomes, that was hard. And so I guess, I mean, that's the experience of where I'm coming from. That doesn't necessarily specifically conflict with the idea of growing standardized and achievement tests. But all that to say, my feeling is that the culture already hates high stakes testing. And for good reason, but I don't think we're working against the culture to say that these are bad, and I also don't think they're bad. I think they serve a really necessary function, and that we can get a more multivariate view of them. All right, 4 minutes of just one freaking thing. One part I love about this article is that they talk a lot about tensions and living in these tensions and what we can learn from these tensions, and I find that a ton, right? I always tend to feel tensions and then learn from them. There's a certain energy that I get from these tensions. The first journal input is all about this mother getting a report card and really being put off by how absences were recorded as excused, allowable, and non-excusable, and how all of these outcomes were recorded as not rated, not yet, beginning, developing, and well-developed. And so it was a strands-based report card. It had things like, I remember songs, poems, and chants, and then for this particular person, developing. Or I experiment with print, and for this person, not yet. So she was shocked to have these, low grades, these indicators that her daughter was not achieving the standards from the perspective of the school. And that was a huge shock to her. She always met her daughter where she was, and she had a deep familial what they would call familial curriculum, where multi-generations were playing with their daughter often and learning, and she felt like they were doing great. And then to get this first report card saying that in some things you are, I think she was, whatever the highest thing is, well developed in all the social categories, except dress myself or something. What is it? I can dress myself, which was developing, which is the second highest. So like maybe she didn't know how to do a button one time. Anyways, this caused a ton of discomfort for this parent, and it's really interesting and really valuable to reflect on. She felt uncomfortable with the absences, but later we find out that she only had one absent and one late, and that she knew specifically. One was a long weekend when they were going to visit family, the absent, and the late was at the doctor, there was a lineup at the doctor's office. So she felt judged by these absences, and I really think that that would not be how the educator would have looked at it. If I see someone that has one absent and one late in a semester, that's something to celebrate. And so I think this may be one of those situations where when you start getting self-critical, things that weren't supposed to be critical feel critical also. So a really valid experience, but I think, I don't know, misguided understanding of what that means or what that could have came from. What else? They talk about this idea of encouraging curriculum as life, as a counter story. And, they acknowledge the idea that in this plethora of discussions, they're trying to push a new counter story, which ideally could be very positive, but they recognize that it's counter to the main story, which is interesting to me. It's ironic to me because I feel like I'm defending the counter story of having curriculum as course of study within my university course. Because within the small world of this course, it seems very clear to me that what the course articles believe in is curriculum as life. And as someone that believes in curriculum as course of study and curriculum as life, don't get me wrong, I think it's really valuable and really positive, and depending on how you define things, I think it's as important, or no, I don't think it's more important, but it's as important. Understanding that your students are children and that what you teach is more than it is contextually part of your whole understanding is more important. So I do think that the life of curriculum, your curriculum as life, is more important than curriculum as course of study. But I think that curriculum as course of study, I think that the word curriculum should mean course of study, and I think that it's more effective to develop what we're supposed to do in a clear, well thought out, explicit way than it is to balloon this concept of what we learn to mean everything, because at a certain point the risk is that course of life, which is not defined, becomes defined by someone, and I don't like the idea of it being defined by individual teachers, wholly defined by individual teachers, because then there's no continuancy over years, and then it's up to every individual teacher to decide what's happening in a classroom, and I don't know why that would be appropriate. I already think I have a ton of autonomy in my classroom, and so I think I can already control a ton of what I do in my classroom, but I do appreciate there being a legitimate or approved set of goals to orient myself, and then go from there. Okay, we're at 10 minutes. My apologies. There was one interesting piece that said that when teachers get to build goals, they find that teachers tend to identify goals that focus more on identity than on knowledge or skills. But when a higher body looks at goals, they almost never think about identity. They think of knowledge and skills. Yeah, and that was an interesting point, and I'd like to think more about that. What else we got here? Oh, I was curious what, Ori, who's the mother, ends up making a at-home curriculum report card, which I think is a really cool idea, and she brings it into her parent-teacher interview to show the teacher, and the teacher's receptive to it too. And so I love that, right? If it says that your daughter is not yet, writing, expressing herself in words, but then you can show from home that she is expressing herself through words, I think that should be valid data. I wonder whether the outcomes that are in the at-home curriculum are the same as the report card ones, and it's just more assessment in the best way, more data in the best way, or whether she's actually putting, appreciation for generations, or I don't know, making a puzzle, like things that would not be in a school curriculum but could be in an at-home curriculum. Cooking, even if it's not at that age yet. So I'm just wondering what her family outcomes are. Yeah. It was really interesting. There was a lot to take from it, and I did really appreciate it. So I guess that's where I will end. 12 minutes. This might be my longest one yet. Woo!